You come home from school, you open the door, and the house is completely silent. No one asks how your day was. No one is there. You make yourself a sandwich, turn on the TV, and figure it out alone. This is the story of Generation X, the generation nobody talked about, the generation that raised itself, and somehow became the most quietly powerful humans of the modern era. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. 65 million Americans squeezed between the enormous baby boomers and the endlessly discussed millennials. They were never the center of attention, not when they were children, not as teenagers, not even now, and yet they built the internet era. They founded the companies you use every day. They quietly changed everything. To understand Gen X psychology, you have to understand one single image, a key on a string around a child's neck. They called them latchkey kids, children who came home to empty houses every day because both parents were working or because one parent had already left. Divorce rates in America doubled between 1960 and 1980. Millions of kids were navigating that instability every single day. No helicopter parents, no scheduled play dates, no participation trophies, just a key and the expectation that you'd figure it out. Their primary caregiver was a television set. MTV launched in 1981 and Gen X watched it obsessively, not as entertainment, but as a window to a world that felt more real than their own home. They grew up with Atari, VHS tapes, Saturday morning cartoons with no adult supervision and no time limits. This gave them something unusual. They learned to entertain themselves, to sit with boredom, to imagine, skills that would quietly define their entire adult lives. Here is the central psychological question of Generation X. What happens to a person who grows up never being told they did a good job? The easy answer is they become insecure. They become approval seekers. They fall apart. But Gen X didn't, and researchers are still trying to explain why. The answer is this. When external validation never comes, some people develop a ferocious internal compass. They stop asking, did I do well, and start asking, do I think I did well? And those are very different questions. Gen X became the most openly cynical generation in modern American history. And the cynicism wasn't random. It was earned. They watched their parents' marriages fall apart. They watched corporations downsize their parents out of careers they'd spent 30 years building. Trust for Gen X was not given freely. It was something you proved through action. This cynicism became armor, and like all armor, it protected them, and it also weighed them down. Psychologists find one trait in Gen X above everything else: emotional stoicism. These are people who do not perform feelings. They were never taught to. In a world that now celebrates vulnerability, Gen X often appears closed off, but there's a difference between suppression and control. Gen X didn't stop feeling. They learned to carry their feelings without dropping everything else. That is not a flaw. That is a skill. Gen X does not trust systems, not governments, not corporations, not media. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. They watched Watergate as children. They graduated into recessions. They were promised job security and got downsizing. Every major institution they were told to trust eventually disappointed them. So Gen X became the original DIY generation. Not because it was trendy, because they had no other choice. Here is where the story changes. Every single thing Gen X was criticized for, the detachment, the cynicism, the independence, the refusal to perform happiness, turned out to be exactly what the 21st century required. The world didn't need more compliance. It needed people who could think for themselves when every signal was telling them not to. People who could adapt without a manual, who could fail without collapsing, who didn't need a crowd to tell them they were right. Generation X had been training for this their entire lives. Gen X is the only generation that grew up fully analog and became fully fluent in the digital world. Typewriters, then computers, then the internet, than smartphones. Not because they were forced to, because they adapted naturally without complaining. While boomers struggled with technology and millennials never knew a world without it, Gen X was the hinge. In every organization, the person trusted by the 60-year-old and the 25-year-old at the same time, that's Gen X. Gen X invented a particular kind of humor: dry, self-deprecating, ironic, dark at the edges. The Simpsons, Seinfeld, Office Space, Fight Club. These weren't just entertainment. They were psychological survival. When you can't fix the broken system, you make fun of it. This humor protected Gen X from the worst of their circumstances and made them extraordinarily fun to be around once they let you in. Sociologists call Gen X the bridge generation. The last people who remember the world before the internet changed everything, and the first who truly understood how to live inside it. They mentored millennials without resentment. They cared for boomer parents without complaint. They held the middle as they always had. Invisible, essential, underappreciated, and entirely at peace with that. Gen X redefined what success looks like without making a big announcement about it. They are not chasing status. They don't need you to know about their promotion. They want quiet stability, authentic relationships, work that means something, time that belongs to them. While younger generations are learning that hustle culture is a trap, Gen X never believed in it in the first place. They figured out early that no one was going to applaud. So they stopped performing and started living. The psychological legacy of growing up without applause is simple. You stop needing it. And when you stop needing applause, something extraordinary happens. You become free, free to make unpopular decisions, free to stay in a job that pays less but means more, free to end relationships that look good but feel hollow. Gen X has a word for this, though they never use it earnestly. Authenticity. They lived it before it was a brand value. Gen X didn't march in the streets, they didn't post manifestos. Their revolution was quieter. In boardrooms where they refused to play politics, in families where they broke the cycle of emotional unavailability, in creative work that said something true instead of something safe. They are the most quietly influential generation alive, and most of them would shrug and say, "Good. I didn't need you to notice." Was Gen X neglected? Yes, clearly, often. Systematically, yes. But were they also accidentally freed? Freed from the need for approval, from the performance of happiness, from the exhausting maintenance of an image someone else designed for them. The children who came home to empty houses became adults who were never empty. Nobody clapped. And somehow that made all the difference. If this video made you think about someone in your life or about yourself, leave a comment below. And if you want to go deeper into generational psychology, the next video is right there.